Hi, so now the Mrs. H Psychology. This time it is for paper 2 approaches section, and specifically with behaviorists. So I'm just going to talk through how to do the STEM type question with operant conditioning. So it's paper 2, A-level psychology, paper 2, specifically if you've got questions like this in the approaches section, and we've got a different one on SLT and classical conditioning. So this is your little video clip on operant conditioning. So let's have a look at a couple of short questions, application questions. Okay, so here's one. Helena is always late for her psychology lessons. Her teacher has decided to apply operant conditioning to improve Helena's punctuality. Explain how the teacher might use positive reinforcement to change Helena's behaviour for 2 marks. So again, using technique to try and help you with focus on the specific question. The big picture, we know that it is about behaviorism. The middle picture is specifically operant conditioning. And then very specifically, the little picture, the bit you have to answer is about positive reinforcement. So that's the bit you're going to hone in on. Okay, so it is an application question, a STEM question. So we're getting just AO2 marks here. Right, so what we've got to do is we've got to make sure our key terms are put into our answer, and we're applying that specifically to this scenario. Okay, so we need to get in there that operant conditioning is all about consequences of behavior, and here we're asked to talk about positive reinforcement and how this teacher is using positive reinforcement. So we need to also get into our answer that positive reinforcement is always strengthening a behavior by giving something positive. Okay, so as I say, it must be applied to this specific. So basically, we need to say the teacher gives Helena something positive, in other words, praise or attention after the desired response, so after she is being punctual. So, you know, I would recommend that you outline that operant is all about consequence behavior, and here specifically, he's giving attention maybe in order, which is the positive reinforcement, attention, in order to strengthen her behavior of being punctual. So always state the positive reinforcement. Okay, what is the positive reinforcer? And always state the desired response very specifically. So the desired response here, the bit you want to strengthen, is her being punctual. And how is he doing that? What is his positive reinforcement? It is giving her praise or attention in order to get that desired response, and that is the positive reinforcer. Okay, so moving on to the next question, a follow-up question. Helena's geography teacher is proud of the high levels of punctuality shown by his students. His students know that unless they arrive on time, he will phone their parents and keep them behind after school. Explain how a behaviourist might account for the high levels of punctuality shown by the geography student. So refer to reinforcement of behaviour in your answer. So again, it's an application question, so 2 AO2s. And again, specifically home in on this, they're asking you to refer to reinforcement. So you're not going to get credit for talking about punishment. Punishment is the opposite. Remember, punishment, you're trying to weaken a behaviour. With reinforcement, you're trying to strengthen it. So they are the opposite thing. Okay, so although this might look like he's punishing, you are needing to talk about reinforcement. So be careful with this. Okay, so what have we got here? Identify that it is negative reinforcement. All right, why is it negative? Because he is removing some sort of aversive stimuli. The aversive stimuli would be him phoning parents or keeping them behind or something like that. In fact, the aversive stimuli would be that, if you like, he is punishing them. So in this case, keeping them behind after school. So you are removing that, or rather they are learning to remove that. Okay, that possible, punishment, if you like. So refer to the desired response here. Think about what is he trying to strengthen. So it is their punctuality that's been strengthened. So you need to be very clear with that. That what the behavior that's been strengthened is their punctuality, i.e. they're arriving on time. How does he achieve that? So he's achieving that by them learning to avoid the unpleasant consequence. So that is why it's negative reinforcement. Okay, so it's only for 2 marks, so you don't have to spend much more time on that. So he's getting them to learn to avoid those unpleasant consequences. Okay. So with these sort of questions, let me just make sure this is really clear. First of all, identify and state if it's positive or negative reinforcement that is at force here. In other words, identify and state which specific behavior is being reinforced, i.e. being strengthened. So that will help you if you can identify that and you state which behavior is being strengthened, and then also state how that's occurring. And that will help you to identify and state whether it's positive or negative, reinforcement that's going on. Okay, so how is that behavior being reinforced? You know, are they giving something pleasant, which would be positive reinforcement? Are they taking something unpleasant away? That would be negative reinforcement. Okay, so once you've identified what is going on, how you are achieving that strengthening of behavior, that will point out for you whether it's positive or negative. Right, if it was for an essay style question, you need a little bit more than that, obviously. So you would be trying to introduce other terms like escape, avoidance, mentioning, and so we know the difference between these. Escape is that the aversive stimuli is arriving and you have learned to get away from it. Avoidance is you are anticipating it occurring, and so you've learned to avoid it by doing a specific behavior. You can mention partial and continuous reinforcement. So continuous, whenever the behavior occurs, there's a reinforcer. Okay, so in reality, that's very unlikely to happen. So most of the time we have partial reinforcement. And also you could go on to the schedules of reinforcement. Okay, so specific schedules of reinforcement. So we've got a fixed interval, we've got variable interval, we've got fixed ratio, and we've got variable ratio. So interval is over time, and ratio is the number of times the event happens, the response happens. Okay, so I've got a separate tiny little video outlining those as well that you can have a look at. So schedules of reinforcement could be included. Obviously, if you need even more marks, I would say look at both characters that they mentioned. There's usually two characters. So in these cases, it's the teacher and the student. So also for more marks, you'd be thinking, you know, both of the characters are probably going to be reinforced in their different ways. So think about, you know, how the teacher could be reinforced, for example, in these examples. So if this teacher is getting what he wants in terms of punctuality of students, so they're being reinforced in order to continue that same behavior. So for these two questions, we don't need that development because it's only worth 2 marks, but look out for the number of marks and bear that in mind. And obviously you've got things like extinction, generalization, other elements of behaviorism that you could bring in. Finally, another little different sort of question. So question here, when investigating the conditioning of behavior, behaviorists like Pavlov and Skinner collected quantitative data. So what do we mean by quantitative data? Give an example of quantitative that by a psychologist who has studied conditioning for 2 marks. Okay, so 1 mark obviously for quantitative data. Keep it simple, quantitative data in numerical form. And then 2nd mark is how is that specifically achieved. Okay, so Pavlov, for example, could be a measure of the amount of saliva produced by the dogs, you know, milliliters of saliva produced, something like that. So it's a really objective measure, quantitative, it's in numerical form. Or you could have something like Skinner, time taken to respond to a stimulus. So how long did it take a pigeon to peck a disc? How long did it take a rat to press a lever, for example?